Blockbuster Video was founded in Dallas, Texas in 1985 by an entrepreneur by David Cook. His first store had an inventory of 8,000 VHS and 2,000 Betamax tapes. So it seems like he was going for, I want to have scale and more inventory than normal from the very beginning. And then this gets put on steroids by a true master of capital. Hit me with rabbit hole number 3.
The trash hauling business pointed the way to the rapid expansion of Blockbuster.
In 1987, Waste Management co-founder Wayne Huizenga, who originally had reservations about entering the video rental industry, agreed to acquire several Blockbuster stores. At the time, there were 19, and he brings on associates from Waste Management. Waste Management is thought of as the biggest name in trash hauling and things like that. But again, that was a hugely fragmented local town-by-town industry that Waste Management becomes Waste Management by essentially rolling up individual entrepreneurs and businesses. So Huizenga and his associates from Waste Management basically take the Ray Kroc model initially of franchising. The Blockbuster that I worked for, I'm not going to mention the gentleman's name, but the story I had heard is he was friends with Huizenga, and he cut a deal so that there was a territory, everything south of Tampa and over to Miami in Southwest Florida was his, that he had the exclusive right to the franchise in. So the Blockbuster I worked for was never corporate. He had, the entrepreneur in question had cut this deal with Huizenga to have this territory. So they're franchising, and a lot of those franchises gets bought up and rolled into corporate eventually. But they're just going around buying other chains. All right, so I'm going to bring my firsthand knowledge of the business model of a Blockbuster in Fort Myers, Florida in the 90s. Here's how it works. As we mentioned, with the earliest video stores, they hit on this sort of membership model. There's a reason for that, because legally, by renting out property that the video store ostensibly owns, people sometimes don't bring your property back. And so your membership was a way of getting you to sign a contract that essentially, I can remember them every month having the list of people that they were sending to collections because you've had your video of, again, Jurassic Park for 2 years now, and we want that back. That's also where the late fees come from, though, because as we established with the windowing method, if you buy a new movie that comes out, let's say it's the Tim Burton Batman in 1989. You're paying $100, $200 a copy for it. You need to rent it out a certain amount of times to break even on your investment. And if you cannot get people to bring the movies back, you can't turn them over and earn your margins.
Yep.
So it's interesting how they dressed up the membership. You know, they give you a membership card and you feel like you're part of this club, as a way to dress up the fact that they are afraid you're a cheapskate,
right.
And
they needed to hold you accountable for.
And then the
it.
late fees, you know, you would rent at my Blockbuster Video in 1994 a video for $3, and you'd have it for 2 nights or 72 hours. I can't remember that exactly. But then if you keep it beyond that time period, it's $2 a day. So that can add up to, if you're a week late, you know, you're talking about, you're approaching $15. And so as much as eventually people made fun of the whole concept of late fees, and it was absolutely necessary for the business model of the video store to function.
For sure. I remember at the local flicks that I keep mentioning, my mom, going back to her, she would always do a great job for us kids of trying to get the inside information about when movies were due back that we wanted to see. Mm-hmm. So she would get friendly with the clerks working at Flicks, and actually the owners of Flicks, to say like the so-and-so Batman or whatever is due back tonight by whatever it was, 6 p.m. So if you come here, at 6:01, we should have it. And sometimes that would work, sometimes it wouldn't, though, because to your point, yeah, people would keep them. And Flicks obviously had the concept of both late fees and the membership as well.
Well, and for the people that say, well, the late fees were their real cash cow, that's why they went with it. We would do weekly calls. I was handed a list, and I would get on the phone, and I would notify you that, hey, your 5 days late on this movie. The stores wouldn't do that if it was more lucrative, if the late fees were more lucrative. Plus, you can't people won't keep coming back if they can never see the movie that they want to see.
Right.
Which brings us to another thing that I'm sure you remember. So a video store would have the new release wall. Essentially 50% of the inventory real estate in a store is the new release wall, and the other 50% is sort of the older movies. Mm-hmm. But 85% of the actual inventory in terms of the cassettes themselves were the new releases. So Jurassic Park comes out, and we would have had, 400 copies of that? And then it was always interesting. You could, just walking down the new release aisle, you could see, well, that movie must not have done that well because it's only 2 rows of cassettes and things like that. It was entirely tied to the box office performance and what the store thought the rental on that would be.
Yeah.
But what this leads to, surely you can remember going to the video store to get Jurassic Park, and Jurassic Park isn't there. You go back the next time, still not there. There was a term for it, which was managed disappointment. And isn't it interesting that we'll end by talking about how media now is unlimited selection, instant gratification. Yeah. But how much the video stores were able to get away with. Your entire family gets in the minivan, drives to the store. We got popcorn. We've got our night planned. We just went to Jurassic Park. Now we're going to come back with that Steve Martin movie where he's a evangelist preacher or something.
Right.
The back catalog was the compensation. It's amazing in retrospect how forgiving we were with the fact that you probably had decent odds of 50% of the time going to the video store and not getting what you wanted.
Yeah. And I do wonder how much, now that you bring that up, that's fascinating to think about, like how much of our childhoods of what we actually watched was driven by exactly what you're talking about, by the fact that the first choice was out. So, we're basically relying on a recommendation, maybe from the store clerk, which I'm sure you did a lot of. Mm-hmm. And some people were great at that, but it's still like you were guided in a way, and that sort of sets you on a path to watching certain movies versus other movies.
We're going to end with that because this question of has the internet killed serendipity is the case I'm going to make. But to just, again, for nostalgia purposes, but also for folks that weren't there, I'm going to describe more of like what the video store was. I will tell you this. Working there in high school was great in the sense that everybody showed up. The only equivalent I can think of is probably working at the movie theater. But like my junior year of high school on a Friday night, Saturday night, MG, I would have seen you. I would have seen your girlfriend. I would have seen my T-ball coach. Everybody would have come through. And so, yes, I did. I had Brian's recommendations and things like that. It is weird in retrospect to realize the degree to which you were a quasi local celebrity, because people like MG would say, hey, Brian, I really want to get my hands on this. Can you set it aside?
Yes.
All sorts of stuff like that. But do you remember that as well, that like going, the weekends going to the video store was a thing, and it was a social thing. It was the entire town coming to one centralized place.
I do remember that very well. I remember that honestly more so at Blockbuster, once Blockbuster sort of took over, because a lot of the kids were driving at that point, and so you'd go with your girlfriend or boyfriend, and you'd run into other people there, and sometimes you'd end up leaving together to go watch a movie together because you saw each other at that place. The other funny offshoot of what we talked about earlier, the adult area at the Flicks. The people who worked at that store happened to know who was going in or out of those rooms, and so that was often sort of relayed back to the children of what was going on.
Let me make something very clear. Blockbuster did not have,
I remember,
porn.
Was it a religious stance or
no,
just a general moral stance or something?
It was a trying to be all things to all people stance.
Okay.
In fact, there were certain movies that the studios would allow to have Blockbuster only edits. This was probably towards the end of the 90s.
I do remember that, yeah. There was no NC-17 too, if I remember.
They would not do NC-17. Yeah. I remember like the Scorsese's Passion of the Christ was not allowed to be rented at Blockbuster and stuff like that.
Wow.
So it was, I don't think it was like a moral religious stance. It was, we don't want to piss anybody off. And we want to be seen as the place
family,
where the whole family can
space.
go to.